Good evening, everybody. Yet again, this is our third and final meeting for this year's Westchester County Rent Guidelines Board. We had 3 public hearings. This is, as I said, the third meeting. The agenda is relatively short tonight. We have rebuttals from the tenant and owner representatives on the board, Mr. Finger and Mr. Cherson. I think we said last week that Cherson is doing it because Finger did the presentation last time. And Jean Anderson will again be standing at the podium to do the rebuttal. Unfortunately, Emma Lofton Woods is still unable to be here for reasons of health, and we are missing one public member who hasn't been appointed yet to replace Michael Rosenbaum, who resigned last year. But we do have all of the members of the board who are able to be here are here. Elliot Cherson and Ken Finger, the owner members. Eddie Mae Barnes on my left, public member. Valine Apweb, all the way on my right, is a public member. Elsa Rubin, public member. And Jean Anderson, as you've heard me say several times before, our newest tenant representative, who was sworn in at our Mount Vernon public hearing. Jane Morgenstern is my name. I'm the public member and the chair. And welcome to all of you. So we'll have 10-minute rebuttals. Oh, and I'm sorry, Chuck Lesnick. I managed to do this all the time. It's our counsel, and Richard Heredia, our party
Scrivener.
Scrivener, I like that. Thank you. That'll work. Like Bartleby. Chuck will be the timekeeper, 10 minutes each. It was already decided that because Ken went first last time, he will go last this time. There'll be an opportunity for the board members after each person speaks to ask questions or make comments. And then we'll have, I'll call for motions or a motion on the guidelines, and the board members will vote on the guidelines for leases that will begin October 1st, 2017, and 1- and 2-year leases. So, Mr. Cherson?
No, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're going last. I'm sorry, and I already said that. Jean Anderson, Ms. Anderson.
We just stay here. Just sit here.
Yeah, there is no podium.
Just
It was over there.
Oh, it's all the way over there. Yes, I think it's just fine if you stay here.
Chairman Morgenstern, members of the board, and Deputy Counsel Lesnick. First and foremost, I want to thank the members of the board and Deputy Counsel Lesnick for welcoming me as a new member. I still have a lot to learn, but what I do know from my work experience in social service and my current volunteer work in soup kitchens is that affordable housing is a critical need, and that ETPA, while not perfect, plays a vital role in helping people survive. I also know that the board is charged with passing guidelines that preserve the dwindling supply of regulated apartments while allowing owners to cover their expenses. Based on all the testimony presented, it seems obvious to me, as a newcomer to this board, that the facts this year support a rent rollback, or at the very minimum, a rent freeze. And under no circumstances is a court tax of 10+% warranted on the dwindling 311 units under $500 a month, much less having owners reap an additional $2 million from those tenants paying between $500 and $1,000 per month. I have some handouts too. I'd like to point out that the landlord representative, Mr. Finger's presentation last week, had mathematical and logical errors. So I've handed out handouts to correct some of those inaccuracies. The next point I'd like to make is that the bulk of Mr. Finger's presentation last week focused on the owner's objections to the ETPA law. But as I understand it, the existence of the law is not up for debate, and it is not the board's job to debate the pros and cons of housing law. ETPA is the law, and this board is charged with enacting written guidelines in accordance with it. The law may not be perfect. Tenants are none too happy about vacancy control and deregulation or open-ended MCIs, all of which continue to weaken the rent laws and deplete the number of affordable units. But those items are a part of the current law, and this board has a duty to consider those facts when it determines whether any rent guidelines increases are necessary, particularly in light of the increasing revenues and the accelerated increase in net operating profit over the last few years, derived primarily from these regulations. The other important points I'd like to emphasize before we determine guidelines are as follows. Number one, owner total income is up 15% over 3 years. Owner total expenses has been essentially flat over 3 years. Moreover, according to Front Page News just last week, that trend will continue. Increased oil production from non-OPEC countries and the U.S., plus vast stored reserves, have created a glut that means that $50 a barrel is now the new normal, at least in the near term. Number three, owner 2016 net operating income was at 38.5%, the highest in 15 years. That number and the 36.7% net profit the year before that mean that, in hindsight, rent freezes should have been justified for both 2015 and 2016. As for the current year, 2017, projections prepared by Ms. Roach show that even using last year's income numbers and without including additional projected income of 28 to 38 million to be generated from vacancy leases and deregulations, owners will still see a healthy net profit in the range of 33%, even if expenses were to go up an unlikely and unprecedented 9%. However, as is much more likely, if total expenses continue to trend relatively flat, and one includes the millions in vacancy-generated income, the net profit could approach an unprecedented 44 to 46%. Mr. Finger's statement last week that owners, and I quote, can't make a reasonable profit is simply not true, and their own survey proves it. On top of that, owners say they want an additional 4.5% to 6.5%, which would generate yet another 17 to 33 million. On the other hand, the number of rent-stabilized units is down 11% over 3 years and has declined 38% since the advent of decontrol. If that rate of decline continues, all regulated units will be lost by 2029, which is just a dozen years away. The average rent-stabilized rent is $1,393 per month, up 11% in just 1 year. The average rent stabilized 2-year vacancy lease rent has broken the $2,000 a month ceiling with 1-year vacancy leases close behind. But the amount of rent deemed affordable at 30% of AMI is only $836 per month. Sadly, of the nearly 127,000 rental apartments in Westchester, a meager 5% are rent-stabilized units renting less than $1,000 a month. The crisis in affordable housing is very, very real. Rent guidelines that ask the working poor, seniors, and other tenants to put more money into the landlord's pockets when their profit from ETPA units is already at the highest level since 2002 is uncomfortable. This is especially so when owners stand to make an extra $28 to $38 million this year alone off vacancy leases and vacancy deregulations that further deplete the affordable housing stock. Therefore, I ask the board to reach a guideline that is in line with the mandate to preserve affordable housing while providing owners with a reasonable return. This board cannot control the law in its current state, which is dismantling the very system it is intended to protect. And we can't control the economic conditions of stagnant real wages, government cost cutting, as well as higher rates of poverty and unemployment in the cities where most ETPA apartments are located. But this board can control rent guidelines that would push the 1/3 of apartments at the upper rent levels into vacancy decontrol, further reducing the pool of ETPA housing. And we must refuse to exact a poor tax on the 25% of ETPA apartments that rent below $1,000 a month. A tax that will either force long-term tenants out of their homes or require them to spend a greater percentage of their limited resources to keep a roof over their heads at the expense of other necessities. It is simply not appropriate to ask tenants to use their scarce dollars to put millions of additional dollars in the pockets of owners who are already reaping historically high profits, yet who insist they have to make greater levels of profits year after year. And it is certainly not appropriate to do so on the backs of tenants who reside in the scarce 1 in 5 apartments that are ETPA.
Thank you, Jean. Any board members have questions for Jean or comments? If not, I'll call Mr. Cherson.
Thank you, Chairman Morgenstern, and members of the board. Even though we're down. My purpose tonight is not to repeat Mr. Finger's valid reasons for a substantial rent increase to make up for the minimal increases of the past years. Mr. Finger set forth in his statement last week as to the many reasons as to why a substantial rent increase is in order for this year. However, I do want to highlight a few of the points raised by Ken as they bear repeating. And I know we've been repeating this for many years. And I'm not going to repeat everything he said. This board is a product of a statute, New York State statute, that established ETPA, and I think that was in 1984, a long time ago. The law defines our authority and the parameters within which we are to operate. The statute requires, yes, it requires, it doesn't say recommend or suggest or anything else. It says requires by the use of the word shall. That's in the statute, and the word shall is a very important word. It takes the discretion out. Shall means that you will do what the statute says. And this statute says that this board must consider, amongst other things, the economic condition of the residential real estate industry in Westchester County, the real estate taxes and sewer and water taxes, and we know that they go up and up and up every year, the gross operating maintenance costs, the cost and availability of financing, the overall supply of housing accommodations and vacancy rates, relevant data from the current and projected cost of living, including this year, 2017, the increased cost of fuel, amongst other things, and the catch-all such other data as may be available to it. Ms. Jean Anderson, our very new tenant representative, and I sympathize with you being thrown into it the way you have, and appreciate what you've done. But you stated in your presentation on behalf of the tenants that the rent should either be rolled back or frozen. Ms. Anderson stated that she was basing her recommendation in large part on her experiences working for the Department of Social Services for 29 years. Moreover, the first and main issue that Ms. Anderson raised was affordable housing. She stated that the tenants of Westchester can't find affordable housing. And parenthetically, I don't have this in here because I heard it tonight. Of course, Ms. Anderson tonight again emphasized the affordable housing question and issue. No matter how you define what is affordable in today's world, the simple fact is that providing affordable housing is not the job of private industry. It is the job of the government. However, the government does in fact provide affordable housing in most of the areas which this board has the most affected housing: Yonkers, Mount Vernon, New Rochelle, and Portchester. In those cities, various government entities have built public housing over the years. And in most of this public housing, there is a Section 8 rent assistance, which provides that a tenant should not pay more than approximately 30% of his income in rent. I don't think anyone on this board or in the audience would contest that paying 30% of income in rent is not affordable. It is. But remember, for every single tenant on Section 8, the government is paying the landlord, whether public housing or private housing, if the private housing is in Section 8, the remaining 70% of the rent. So the tenant pays the 30%, and the government sends the landlord a check for the balance, which is approximately 70%. What this means is that it is the government's job to provide affordable housing, and it's the government's failure to provide an adequate number of public housing units, which is the failure of our various government entities here in Westchester, the state, and certainly in the future the federal government. It is not the failure of private ownership. Simply put, landlords cannot be asked to provide what the government does not. Landlords are not the government. Landlords don't have the power of taxation. But the government does have the power of taxation, and tax they do, each and every year. They increase it each and every year. We all know that. Landlords cannot be the group to make up for the failure of government to adequately do its job. And taking it out on landlords by passing a zero or similar increase simply is not fair, and it's not right. A few other points. The NOI. We've heard a lot about the NOI increases as a basis for setting a low or zero guideline increase. The NOI figures measure the difference between a building's income and expenses. However, this calculation has been repeatedly attacked by the real estate industry because it does not account for major expenses. Patrick Sikanalfi, who is the director of the Community Housing Improvement Program in New York City, stated to the city's RGB, Rent Guidelines Board, this year that the NOI has been used as a proxy for profit. He stated that the NOI is not profit. It's the cost of delivering a unit of housing to the people of this city. The NOI figures do not take into account a building's debt service or the expenses of capital improvements, and as such, they do not accurately reflect the cost of owning buildings with rent-stabilized units. As such, the NOI figures are skewed and should not be used in our deliberations to show landlords are somehow making exorbitant profits. And parenthetically, I mean, there's millions and millions of dollars that Ms. Roach put in her presentation and Ms. Anderson repeated. It's just pie in the sky, absolute pie in the sky. If it was true, you would have every real estate entity rushing to build more units here that are rent stabilized. And I think we all know that there are no rent-stabilized units being built. All new construction is non-rent stabilized. So if these millions and millions of profits were real, the real estate industry, being as smart as I think we all give them credit for, would be building, building, building. They're not. Preferential rents. And I know Elsa sent an email this afternoon concerning them and asking some questions, very good questions. We hear a lot about preferential rents every year. As a lawyer who has been actively practicing landlord-tenant law in the city of New York and Westchester County for over 30 years, I deal with preferential rents constantly. I'm not really sure how the name preferential rent came about. It kind of sounds like a benefit of some sort, but it's not. Preferential rent simply means lower rent than the maximum legal rent for an apartment. In many cases, it is substantially lower than the legal rent. How do I know this? I know this because my firm and myself deal with it almost every day, whether in the courts or in discussions with our clients. The main point about them that I want to emphasize is that preferential rents is another way of saying that the landlord cannot get a tenant to agree to pay the legal rent, which is always higher than a preferential rent. If there is a preferential rent, it means that the legal rent is higher, and the market forces do not allow a tenant, the landlord can't get a tenant to come in and say, okay, the legal rent is X. Well, I'm not paying X. Well, will you pay Y? And Y is less than X. The figures used by DHCR for their calculations are based upon the legal rent and not the preferential rent. This means that the income to the landlords is less than the charts would indicate, as the actual income is lower than that being reported by using legal rents. And Mr. Finger passed out last week his, some figures. And if you look at the figures, you add up for 1 year after a vacancy, 64% of the units are renting for less than the legal rent. 64%. For 2 years, it's 41%. That is a huge amount. So if you just look at black and white, and you look at these figures, oh, the landlords are making millions and millions and millions. That's not reality. We have to deal with reality. And we don't know if there's going to be an oil embargo down the road. We don't know if it's going to stay, if the price of oil is going to be stable. Is anybody in this room going to call Washington stable? I doubt it. Lastly, I did a calculation of the rent increases, or lack of increases, that this board has set since 2010, which was the last year of a 0-0 increase. For the years 2010 through 2016, which is 7 years, the average for all 7 years for a 1-year increase that this board has passed is 1.43%. That's all 7 years. For a 2-year increase, the average is 2.28%. As such, the 2-year increase is less than the 1-year increase if you took it for a 2-year renewal. In other words, 1.43 is almost 3 if you do times 2, but the average is only 2.28%. This is why granting a 2-year increase, I'm almost done, at less than double the 1-year increase simply increases the losses being incurred by landlords by this board's unfair guidelines, which have no relationship to reality. These numbers are less than the cost of living. We all know this. Our job is to comply with the law. I'm requesting that this board jettison the political polemics of our era and grant the private landlords who provide our communities with decent housing the proper increases so that they can provide the type of housing that the government fails to do so despite their inherent responsibility to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Any board members have questions or comments? In that case, time for somebody to make a motion. Finger, Churson?
Well, we'll make a motion that a 1-year, as we pointed out last week, we're requesting a 1-year increase of 4% and a 2-year increase of 6%. A lot of this is without, I'll get to the low income also.
I'd like to do that separately.
Yeah, I'm sorry?
Let's do the low income separately.
Okay. Well, obviously, we're requesting a low income as well. And the 4 and 6% is not pie in the sky, it's not exorbitant. This is in line with the rent guideline board increases that the New York City is suggesting. And of course, in New York, you have a mayor who is rabidly anti-landlord. That's pretty mildly. But the Rent Guidelines Board, now the Rent Guidelines Board in New York City has a whole staff. I mean, they have a full-time staff, they have employees, they have a very nice budget, and they put out the reports every year. And the professionals who are on this, these are full-time employees, the professionals on the RGB staff in the city, they're the ones, and they're not political, they're not de Blasio. They're recommending approximately a 4 for a 1 year and 6 for a 2 year. So our request, we feel, is in line with the good work that they're doing in the city. And as I've said, as long as I've been on this board, there is no difference between New York and here. We are part of the New York metropolitan area. Without New York City, we wouldn't be sitting here.
I second.
Okay, motion by Cherson, seconded by Ken Finger. I just want to point out something. I think you're mistaken about this, what the city is proposing, the range that's being proposed in the city, which incidentally, the city guidelines board is voting tonight also.
They are, that's right.
I believe they're considering between 1 and 3, excuse me, % for 1 year and 2 and 4 for 2 years. Chuck, are you? That's correct. That's correct? Yes.
I believe that's true. However, it's the charge of this board to look at the factors in this county, not necessarily.
Oh, without
Yes,
question.
exactly,
I really,
exactly.
I just
No.
wanted to point
No,
out
exactly,
that you were,
exactly. But also,
that that
as long as-
statement was an error.
as long as, Ms. Chairman, as long as you're bringing it up, other than the past, I think, 1 or 2 years, historically, New York City has granted higher increases
Huge.
exactly, much higher increases than this board. And I think part of Mr. Fingers and my argument is that don't just look at it this year. Don't just look at it as the next 1 and 2 year increases. I think we need, that's why I brought up the past 7 years. Look at the history. Look at how these low guideline increases that this board has been passing over the past 7 years have hurt the industry. Ms. Anderson, you properly pointed out very well the number of ETPA units is going down, and I'm sure your calculation as to it being eliminated by 2029 is in all likelihood is accurate. And that's where we're headed. That's where we're headed. This board will go out of business. I don't think that's what anybody in this room wants, though, including the landlords. They're just looking for a fair amount. They're not looking to get rich on this. They just need to be compensated for their costs, and the costs go up. Plus, they want to have money to maintain the buildings and improve the buildings. You heard it from the various owner representatives. Buildings are expensive to operate, and we all know also that the age of ETPA units or buildings, I'm sure there's been none built since World War II. And most of them were probably built 1910, 1920, 1930. They are old. And the older they get, the more money they need.
Any more discussion on Mr. Cherson's motion? I think I would like to just make a point about the preferential rents, which you said, oh, there's been a lot of talk about it. As far as I recall, I've been on the board, as you have, for a pretty long time now, and it was really only...
Except for my little vacation.
Yeah, you did take some time off. It was really only last year that this started to come up as a real issue. And, I see a certain amount of irony in the fact that the preferential rents are only negotiated, if that's the right word, with the tenants, because they can't, the owners, the landlords can't even get the legal rent that has been established by the guidelines and other, increases that may or may not be attended to those rents. Really, the preferential rents are actually market rents.
In many ways, they are market rents, and in many ways, just to respond to that, if you look at the city, The only place that the rent guideline board increases really have an effect in limiting increase is Manhattan, south of 96th Street. The practical side of this is that the market has basically been the driving force, and the actual numbers that are paid in Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, and Staten Island. But that's a whole other story about Manhattan.
Well, I
We're not Manhattan, we don't have that.
Well, Westchester. But, I also think it's important, again, to observe that the responsibility of this board is to consider the legal rent, which is what we've been doing all along.
Right, but if the landlords aren't getting them, and they're not collecting them, then the figures that are being used, and I understand why they're basing the figures on those figures, they're incorrect,
But
they're skewed.
we know that once the lease is up, the preferential rent can be raised by the amount all the way up to the legal rent, which could be hundreds of dollars.
Only if the tenant is willing to pay it.
No, that's not
No,
Yes,
that is
it
so,
is,
because
absolutely.
otherwise you
Otherwise
wouldn't
they-
have a preferential rent to start with.
What's the point?
You have the preferential rent because you can't rent out an apartment for $2,500 if the market is $1,750. So what good does it do raising it to $2,500 when you can't rent it out for that amount? So in effect, the reality is.
This is not by statute. Of course, if the tenant isn't willing to pay it, either the tenant's going to leave and there'll be a vacancy.
That's right.
But this is not statutory.
But what good does that do?
But
You have a vacancy, you have a
I'm
lost
just-
rent for the months of the vacancy?
I just am
does
saying
that
that
help
to
landlords?
point out that this board considers the legal rent. That's what we are here to consider.
Well, with all due respect, and I certainly entitled to your opinion, I don't think that I would differ with you on that, because I've been a person in my whole career who tries to deal with reality. And what you're suggesting is simply not reality. The landlords are not getting those numbers because the market forces don't allow it. It's plain and simple.
Any more comments or questions? Shall we vote? Will you call the roll?
Want me to call the roll?
Well, who does it?
The chair calls the roll. I'll call the roll.
Yeah, Chuck-
Okay.
Chuck always
No, I
calls
think,
it.
Glad to.
He always calls.
Yeah.
Elliot
And
Church.
you mix it up.
Now I'm going to start this way and go this way.
Make
No.
sure you mix it up as we go.
Yeah, I
All right.
think that's a good idea.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Ken Finger.
Yes.
Eddie Mae Barnes.
No.
Lee Ackler. Elsa Rubin.
No.
Gene Anderson. Chairman Morgenstern.
No.
Surely votes an entire, right?
No.
Sorry?
I can vote no.
No, that we had that incident last year and we established that she gets the vote.
Did?
In fact, the guideline wouldn't have passed last year if the chairman
I'm
hadn't voted.
holding up
Because she broke the
rules.
tie.
No, she voted because
You needed it to get to 5.
you needed it to get to
You
5.
needed to get 5, you didn't need it tonight, but what difference does it make? You
Okay.
know it changed hands.
Okay.
Chair is exercising her rights.
So it's 2 to 5, the motion fails.
We got 2 votes.
Do we hear another motion?
I make a motion that there be a 0% increase in rent.
Is there a second?
Is that for both 1 year and 2 year?
For 1 year.
Both 1 year and 2 year.
Yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Yeah, seconded by Elsa Rubin. I think it's, let's have some discussion on this.
Well, I'll second just because there's no one else to second, or she doesn't have another tenant here.
Right, I know, that I understand that, and I think you did that, for the
You're
purpose
entitled
of
to do that.
discussion, if,
I think that's fair.
yeah, absolutely. Is there any discussion on the motion? or shall we just proceed with the vote? I mean, I think Jean made her, position very clear and explained all the reasons, so we don't need her to reiterate them.
Okay, so I'll mix it up a little bit.
Mix it
Gina
up.
Anderson,
Yes.
Elsa Rubin.
Well, I don't know if I'm
You don't have to vote,
allowed
just because you seconded it, doesn't mean you have to vote for or against it. You can.
We're in the discussion period now.
Oh, I thought we were finished with discussion.
Oh, do you
Oh,
want
I don't know. Well,
If you want to-
I have some concerns to
All right.
have a 0% increase because we have listened to the tenant reps, we've listened to the owner reps, and I don't think at this point we can do a 0% this year, all things considered, based on the presentations we've heard from both sides.
Well, we have a motion, we have a second.
I call the question.
I second call the question.
Any objections? Okay,
Okay.
now let's proceed to a vote.
Gene Anderson, on the motion.
Asking me to vote.
Yes,
Another motion.
the same motion. We just got
We'll
it.
vote on
We're
your
voting on your motion.
Wait, I didn't hear what you said.
So we were just voting. We started to do a roll call. We stopped for some discussion. We're continuing the roll call. So I'm just starting again. You already voted, but I'm asking you again.
Yes.
Elsa Rubin,
No.
Deline Aqua, Eddie Mae Barnes,
No.
Ken Finger,
No.
Elliot Cherson,
No.
Chairman Morgenstern.
No.
Okay. So the motion fails 1-6.
All right, I have the motion. You have to read the tea leaves. So I would make a motion that 1 year be 3% and 2 year be 5%.
Second?
Second.
Oh, yes.
Okay, this time I'm going to start with Eddie Mae Barnes. Oh, and I'm sorry, any discussion?
Any discussion? I was about to witness. No discussion.
Okay, Eddie Mae Barnes.
No.
No. Gene Anderson. Elsa Rubin.
No.
Ken Finger.
Yes.
Deline Aqua. Elliot Cherson.
Yes.
Chairman Morgenstern.
No.
Motion fails 2-5.
Another motion?
I motion, you're not asking for another proposal, right?
Yes, you may make a motion.
I propose that we do a 0.5% increase.
For
1 year?
1 year
Yes.
and 2 years?
And 2 years.
Same for 1 year and 2 years.
Yes.
Okay, this time I'm going to do it in alphabetical
Well,
order.
let's see if there's any discussion. Let's see if there's any. First of all, we don't have a second.
Oh.
How can second? All right, seconded by Deline Aqua. Any discussion?
I mean, as far as discussion goes, this is an example of these numbers, 0.5 and 0.5. This is an example of the history here. And we need to live in the real world. The real world is not 0.5% increases. It's going to destroy the housing, and instead of 2029, it may be 2026.
Any further discussion?
Can we clarify that it was 0 and 0.5?
No, don't begin
No.
that question.
If you
No.
could,
Just to repeat the vote, it was 0.5 and 0.5.
0.5 and 0.5.
Is that what it was?
Correct? Yes.
That's your
No, that's not correct.
Why are we
All right, that's
responding?
enough from the audience. We said it was 0.5 and 0.5, and that's what it is. Chuck?
Okay, in alphabetical order, Eddie Mae Barnes,
No.
Elsa Rubin,
No.
Elliot Cherson,
No.
Jane Morgenstern,
No.
Gene Anderson,
Yes.
Ken Finger,
No.
Helene Aqua. The motion fails 1-6.
I'll make another motion, and I really think that this one, unfortunately, as long as I've been on the board with Jane and some other people, we have a bit of a game that goes on here. It's unfortunate but true, and that's the reality of things. And we'll see how it goes. But what I'm about to propose, I think, is a very fair number. It's fair to the tenants. It's fair to the landlords. It's fair to both sides. Okay? And instead of going, up, down, which is what we've been doing, I think 2 and 3%. 2% for a 1, 3% for a 2-year is a fair amount, and especially given the past years of just minuscule increases. This is not a lot of money, and it's fair. It's a fair number for both sides. So I highly recommend that we do 2 and 3.
I second.
Any? Well, I'm sorry that you characterize it as a game. It really isn't a game. Everybody we look at the figures and the facts, and we have a wealth of information.
You know what he meant.
I know what he meant, but
And you're the chairperson. You should be neutral.
I know what he meant, but I don't consider it a game. I think, the board has been, over the years, really responsible in trying to assess what they believe is a fair guideline. And I will say that I think now, and I'm talking about the tenant representatives, the owner representatives, and the public members, we have all been, I believe, very thoughtful, and we take this very seriously. We do not view it as a game.
Yeah, I'd like to reply to that.
By all means.
The New York State Legislature, which created this law, basically kicked the ball down the gutter. If you look at the rent control laws, the rent control increases are set by the government, and the rent control increases per year are much, much higher than ETPA or rent stabilized guideline increases. And that's because the government, the agencies in the city and in Westchester, they look at the numbers and they're serious about those numbers. And based upon their review of those numbers, they come out with numbers that are real. And I know you're criticizing me for it, but my experience on the board, unfortunately, this is a political entity that was set up by the state because the state assemblymen and senators don't have the, what's the right word?
Guts.
Guts, okay. Guts is good. To do it themselves. So what do? They pass it along. They set up an RGB in the city. There's one here, Nassau, Rockland, because they don't want to do it. So they pass it to us. And they set up a board that has inherent shortcomings. 2 landlord representatives, 2 tenant representatives. They just knock each other out. And then you have 5 if you have a full contingent of the public members. And they're supposed to represent the public, and I think most people, they do. But this is a political body. That's what it is, and that's the reality. And maybe we don't like it, and I don't like it, and nobody likes what goes on in politics, but it is reality.
I call the question.
Any objection?
Okay, in reverse,
What's the vote?
the vote is on 2% for a 1-year, 3% for a 2-year. In reverse alphabetical order by last name, we have Elsa Rubin,
No.
Jane Morgenstern,
No.
Ken Finger,
Yes.
Elliot Cheerson,
Yes.
Edie Mae Barnes,
No.
Helene Aqua,
No.
and Gene Anderson. What was the result?
1.5.
It was
Two years.
Two.
I have a motion.
2.5.
Two. No, there's 2 to 5. Motion
Sorry,
fails.
Ken?
All right, I move 1.5% and 2.5%.
Second?
Second.
Well, I expected that, but I think you needed to say it out loud.
Yes, I did.
Discussion? Vote?
This time reverse alphabetical order by first name. Marie McAvoy. Ken Finger.
Yes.
Gene Anderson. Jane Morgenstern.
No.
Elsa Rubin.
No.
Elliot Cherson.
Yes.
Eddie Mae Barnes.
No.
So that also is 2 to 5.
Any other motions? We need a motion.
I have a motion.
Ruben?
To come up with this decision, we relied on the data that is supplied to us. We relied on the testimony of the tenants, the landlords, and all the other information that we have in front of us. During the public meetings, there were 2 invitations that the board members got. One from the representative of the tenants and one from the landlady. I took the invitations up and I went to visit the office of Mr. Dennis Hanbari, and I met the clients that he had. I saw the cases that he had, the evictions that he had to deal with, and it was an eye-opener. I also took up the invitation of Ms. Carol Danziger, who is a small building owner, and she took me around her building. She showed me, she introduced me to some of her tenants. Some of them are disabled, some of them have been there for 50 years. And I also realized that they have expenses, they have to keep the buildings, and they have to make a living. So while we are keenly aware that no matter what we decide here, it's not going to please everyone, we strive to reach a fair compromise. And I don't agree with what has been said, that we are a political body. We try to be fair. We try to be conscious of all the needs of everybody. And therefore, we are proposing a 1-year raise of 1% and a 2-year raise of 1.5% with no low rent increase.
I second that motion.
Well, I suggested earlier that we separate the no low rent increase. But
Okay.
if there's no objection, we can vote on this motion in 2 years. 1 and 2 year with no low rent increase. And we'll see what happens with that.
So the proposal is 1% and 1.5.
Correct. No low rent increase.
No, that's separate.
That's a separate vote.
Can we amend the motion then to just have the motion on 1% and 1.5%, and then the low rent increase motion, I'm sure will be made at the appropriate time after we agree on a guideline, or we vote on a guideline that's successful.
Okay, I second the amended.
Do you accept the amendment?
Yes, I
No,
do.
thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Okay.
Okay, in reverse alphabetical order by the town of your residence, Elliot Cherson of Tarrytown.
By the town?
By the town of your
I take it
residence.
back, it is a game.
I'm mixing it up as you
No,
requested.
I'm joking, I'm kidding.
Pass.
What's
What
that?
did you just?
Pass.
Pass.
Pass. No, pass.
Okay,
Pass. What?
Are you abstaining?
No, I'm passing for now. I'd like to vote.
Or you want to vote later?
Yeah.
okay. Eddie Mae Barnes, Post Office Box, Scarsdale, even though it's Greenberg.
And now we can tell.
Yes.
Ken Finger, Scarsdale, even though your office is in White Plains.
I'll pass it.
Gene Anderson of New Rochelle.
Yes.
Valine Aqua of Mount Vernon.
Yes.
Elsa Rubin of Mamaroneck.
Yes.
And Jane Morgenstern of Dobbs Ferry.
Yes.
So are the passes
That's
abstentions? What?
That's fine.
So it's 5-0.
I'm going to abstain.
Abstain.
Both of them. I'll abstain.
So the motion passes 5-0 with 2 abstentions.
I'm going to propose a low rent increase. I'm going to propose a $25 a month increase for every tenant under $500 and a $15 a month increase for every tenant under $1,000.
Between 500
500
and 1,000,
500,000, yes,
to clarify.
That's per month.
per month.
Discussion?
Yeah, 25 to 15. Seconded?
I second.
Oh,
So I have a little, just want to say something
Yes.
further to that. Another thing that, and a lot of people hear about it, but if you're in the court system, as I am and Mr. Finger is, one of the hottest topics is succession. And succession takes place because somebody is paying a low rent because a grandparent, let's say. They've lived there forever. And this happens, you can't count how many times this happens. So grandma, the grandchild, the grandchildren look and they see grandma, she's old and she may not be around much longer. And they move in. And as long as they move in and stay with grandma for 2 years before she leaves, they get to succeed to the apartment. And they pay the exact same rent that grandma was paying. The same thing. So that keeps the grandson, let's say, who's moving in, his income, more than likely, is substantially higher than grandma's was. And they can afford a higher rent. But landlords are now saddled with the succession laws, which require them to, if there's somebody in that circumstance. So what this does is it just evens it out a little bit more, makes it a little fairer for landlords when they're faced with these succession claims. And again, besides the legal fees that they incur, which are tremendous, it just makes it a little fairer, and that's who's really going to end up paying this. It's people who succeed to these apartments. So I think it's a very fair thing. It's not a lot, and we should pass that.
Anybody else? Is that
yeah, question.
is that $25 for 1 year and then $50 for next year? Is that what you're saying?
No.
No, that would be for both.
All right, let me clarify, okay?
For both years, whether you take a 1 year lease or a 2 year lease,
Oh,
that's
right.
what it would be. It's no different whether you have a 1 year lease or a 2 year lease. We just want to work on trying to get those people who are really, as Elliot says, succession or subsidizing those who are preferential up a little bit and try to equalize the rent a little. And maybe hopefully get some mobility in the rental market, which you don't have now.
So just for clarification, the $25 and the 50 are separated by income, I'm sorry, by rent, and it's in lieu of the 1% and the
No,
1.5. It's in
no.
addition to the 1% and the 1.5%.
Right.
So for example, if the rent is 450, it would go up to 475 plus the 1% if they take a 1.
And if it's 550, it would go up to 565.
Right, so if it's higher, it goes even lower. The $600 rent would go up to 615. 615.
615.
61, not 65,
15.
615.
I didn't say 50, I said 15.
Okay, so it's 25 and 15.
Right.
I'm trying to make it palatable.
So we're talking about a small increase for people paying very, very low rents.
Do you have a second? Second?
Oh, yeah, I did it before. I'll do it again.
Motion by Ken Singer, seconded by Elliot Cherson. You want me to repeat the motion?
I think everyone understands.
Everybody understands it? Is it clear? Any further discussion?
I have shuffled the pages randomly. Valeen Aqua. Ken Finger.
Yes.
Elsa Rubin.
No.
Gene Anderson.
No.
Elliot Cherson.
Yes.
Eddie Mae Barnes.
No.
Chairman Morgenstern.
No.
The motion fails 2-5.
Congratulations, everybody. We have a guideline.
Now, there's traditionally the second motion on the people who pay
Yes.
heat and hot water?
Yes.
It's 80%.
Yes.
Can you, there's a formula that we've been using
80%.
for,
80%.
which is 80% of the guideline for those tenants for whom the landlord does not supply heat and hot water. We need a motion for
To make it official, yes.
make it, thank you, make it official. It's essentially a formula. Motion by Rubin, seconded by Valeen Aqua. What?
Hold on.
All right. Yeah. This is for the guideline for tenants who, for whom the landlord doesn't supply heat and hot water, and as long as I've been on the board, we use the formula, as Ken noted, that it would be 80% of the guideline, and that's the motion as I understand it. Any discussion? Let's vote.
Valeen Aqua.
Yes.
Elsa Rubin.
Yes.
Gene Anderson.
Yes.
Jane Morgenstern. Eddie Mae Barnes.
Yes.
Ken Finger.
Abstain.
Elliot Cherson.
Abstain.
The motion passes 5-0 with 2 abstentions.
Okay, I think we have no more official business. I want to thank everybody again. Everybody has come, week after week, and I do appreciate it. Have a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn, Eddie Mae Barnes, is seconded by Elliot Cherson. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We're adjourned.